Yeah. All right. I'm gonna get straight. I'm gonna make the case. So the question effectively is: does NVIDIA have an enduring moat? Is this a competitive advantage that's going to be sustainable? Is it going to last? When you look at, I think one thing about Jensen is he's always been someone who thinks decades in the future, decades in advance. He positioned himself for so many waves that eventually exploded and went absolutely parabolic.
Yeah.
So you had gaming, building the GPUs, building the CPUs for those.
Can't argue that.
Yeah, and effectively positioned himself right at the wave. I think probably 21, 22, the massive capping investment in the new kind of era of GPUs to be ready for the AI wave, for generative AI specifically. I think the question now is they've gone from that to today being a $5 trillion company, 80% plus market share, depending on how you look at what markets they own. And they're getting 50, 60% net margin. So they're having it. However you want to slice it, they're killing it. They're killing it.
They are killing it.
People want to know. Now Amazon's doing it. They're building their own chips. Google's doing it. They're building their own chips. There was rumors.
Chip market.
There was rumors.
You've seen NVIDIA's valuation. I want a piece of that.
Exactly, but it's the profits as well. I think it was even Peter Thiel was talking about it. If you make abnormal profits for too long, no matter how high the barrier to entry is, no matter how long it's been, no matter how long the lead time is, at some point these entrants, these incumbents, especially those that are well funded already, they will come in and they will start to build alternatives, even to get their own cost base down, let alone for distributing them as their own products. Right? So that's what the argument is at the minute. For me, I think there's a few things that are just being massively underestimated in the whole conversation. So when I think about NVIDIA, I'm not necessarily sure that their differentiation is actually on minimizing the cost per token. Right. When I think about NVIDIA, I think the competitive advantage is on minimizing the total cost of ownership across the stack. So think about the data center, think about the GPU, and then think about the software to operate the AI workloads. I think when you put those all together and you run them on NVIDIA, you have something that's hard to beat.
Yeah, I see. But as well, I mean, when you're thinking about cost, I think now the way the landscape is shifting, we're not having as many people doing the big model training anymore. So as time goes by, like, people are focused less on training as we go into the agentic era. And what gets more important right now is inference, because that's actually what sells, like when people buy like your model essentially. So, but at the inference level, what matters now is like the cost of inference. And even I saw recently that even OpenAI, which has basically been NVIDIA's church, like they've been the one preaching for NVIDIA. Like OpenAI has been NVIDIA's church. Like I was surprised that they've actually started to buy down Google's TPUs, which means that even they're realizing that they need to bring down the cost of inference as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I think you are getting to something interesting on almost a slightly separate risk, is that customer concentration risk as well, right? Because all of NVIDIA's customers are these big, massive hyperscalers. I hate the term, but hyperscalers, the massive big tech companies, right? So if they do manage to effectively fulfill their own needs with their own chips, then you could potentially have a problem further down the line. Here's the case I'm going to make that I think is interesting and that I think people are underestimating. I think the magnitude of the demand is being massively, massively underappreciated. So NVIDIA is selling out everything 6 months in advance, a year in advance. Every next generation is 6 months, 12 months, 18 months in advance. It's already sold out with contract orders from these customers who supposedly already have their own alternative. It's not something is not adding up. It doesn't make sense. And secondly, I think recently they made that big, what is it, $20 billion acquisition of Grok.
Yeah.
Not the AI, LLM, the TPU or LPU provider, I should say. So they've already seen this gap as well in terms of the more inference specialized chip. And they have already started to move towards it. So again, I kind of come back to the original question. How are you going to compete away NVIDIA when it has this ecosystem of chips and software for AI, already has that 5 or 6 year lead time? If you remember, they're talking about a depreciation cycle of 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
if you've already made that investment and bought 5 or 6 years worth of GPUs, even if these new chips that at a lower cost per token are free, even if they're free and you're not paying a cent or a penny for them, you're still going to be taking a massive loss on trying to switch. That's the switching cost. So I'm not on this. I'm not sold. I think NVIDIA is king, and I think they're here to stay.
I mean, I see your point, but one thing you also have to keep in mind is that right now, one of the major bottlenecks is power.
Yeah.
And power being a bottleneck means efficiency is very important. So if you got a data center, while you have all the power and everything, if you can't actually give it the juice, which is why obviously they're saying ridiculous things like data centers in space and all of that.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
If you can't actually give it the juice, you want to make the most of what you have available, and which is what I think 2 days ago Google just announced, like the new generation of TPUs, one focused on inference and the other on training. And I think even though they don't have the total raw power that the NVIDIA GPUs have, when you see what the actual constraints today are, you actually want to make the most of what you can get, which is why I think the advantage that Google has, and also keep in mind, also in a few years from now, I feel like training is just not going to be as important. Like, while I agree, like in the next maybe short term, 1 year, 2 years, NVIDIA might still be on top of it. I feel like when you go further, like training is you've basically done most of the training you can do, because there's only so much data out there. And you've exhausted how much training you can do. And now it's about like your inference and the agentic capabilities and how fast these things need to be. Because I think one of the advantages that the CPU has is the speed of inference. So when you start looking at speed of inference, then you might see why a CPU might be compelling. You know?
Yeah, no, but again, I'm not even disagreeing. I'm actually genuinely, I'm not even disagreeing on that. I agree with you on that. I'm not disputing the fact that it has a lower cost per token for inference workload. I think that appears to be well documented. That appears to be true. I'm still not. Let's just come back to this depreciation cycle in a little bit more detail. Yeah, you got a 5 or 6 year depreciation cycle. Let's say most of the investment has come in the last couple of years, right? And we can find some sort of data point after. We know from everything that we've seen, the ramp up of the capex from big tech has gone up exponentially over the last couple of years, right? 2 or 3x for most of them. If you look at Amazon, Meta, Google, right? Most of that has gone into the compute layer, right?
Sure.
And that goes back to the different generations, but of these GPUs. So when you say, oh, over the next 1 or 2 years, I'm kind of looking at it and going, over the next 4 or 5 years, I don't see how they're going to just write that off and switch to a TPU on the basis of cost. I don't see it happening. Then I want to challenge another bit as well. We said something about this training versus inference distinction, which is important. But if you actually think of how these guys are building their models at the minute, they will have a period of training for each model.
Right.
So obviously OpenAI just did 5.5, GPT 5.5, what was it, yesterday?
Yeah, it dropped.
By the time this drops, but yeah, this week, and so, again, from my understanding is there's another period of intense training on more recent data to go and build that model. So what are we actually saying? Are we saying that this 5.5 or whatever model it is of Gemini or Grok or whatever it is the last one? Is that what we're saying? My understanding is that each generation is going to need another level of training. And so I don't think this, I don't know if the training, I'd agree that the inference curve is going to keep going exponential and keep flying. But this training being, the end of the road, I'm not even sure if that premise is even true.
Yeah, I mean, you have a good point there, because one thing is if you train a model, it has a cutoff date. So you kind of need to train another one with I mean, the other side of that is, do you really need to keep training if once they have the agentic capabilities, they're basically online all the time? Like, if you get them agentic capabilities, they can search the web, they can do whatever, they're online all the time. I don't know if companies are going to want to keep spending the amount they spend on training consecutively. By the time most models reach basically like, I mean, my belief is that they're going to pick at some point, and after that, it's basically like diminishing returns. Like, would you really spend that much to train to have like marginally better models. Like,
I guess we start to get into something interesting. You almost start thinking about what are the actual applications and use cases and verticals, right? Because that question of, you know, at what point does the gradient start to flatten up, and at what point do you start to get to diminishing returns is interesting, because when I think about this, I'm sure that the use cases are actually still going to continue to evolve. So, for example, these models that we have seen so far, the obvious ones that have gone into, you know, GPTs, your Groks, your Claudes, all that good stuff, are they going to be able to handle what robots need to do? So when, you know, it's, I need something to go and clean the house, clean the car, is it going to be the GPT 5.5 LLM brain that goes and does that as well? At the moment, we don't really know. I'm sure Elon might be there and he might be able to tell us, and people are working on it. We don't know. Are they building their own specialized containerized LLMs instead? Or are they just training on these big foundational models? I don't know yet, and I guess not everyone's gonna know.
I mean, fair enough. You make a good point there, because even with like self-driving cars, for example, they don't use the same model.
I doubt it. That's what I say. I doubt
they
it.
use specifically trained models. So I guess there are some evolving cases where you need to keep training. So yeah. I mean, I guess fair point that.
And I'll tell you one more thing as well. Yeah. I think this whole argument in a kind of parallel way is also happening in memory at the minute as well. So you've got the big, you know, you got Micron, SK Hynix, so all the big kind of memory providers, particularly for HBM and DRAM, right? And everyone at the minute is kind of saying, oh, like the demand for memory is going crazy, memory prices are going crazy, but it's cyclical. It's cyclical, it's going to crash in a couple of years. And, you know, these companies, like, they might look like they're doing really well, but it's going to crash. Again, I kind of look at it again and think, how close do we actually think we are to the peak? Because if you think how much memory, the things people are doing at the minute, we are so far off the level of memory that we need that they're able to put their prices up 2 or 3x, like over the space of a quarter, right? And so I'm kind of looking at it and going, think about when you want agents to just be doing work autonomously and independently for months at a time, which is obviously where we're going. It's obviously where we're going. So I look at it and go, is the curve going to go like that and diminish? Or is the curve actually, are we even actually at the exponential point yet? I'm not even sure if we are. And even the robots point, think about when the robots are going to be there just doing things completely autonomously for a period of time. I think the memory curve is similarly in the same way, the same conversation we just had. I think we're a long way off that.
Yeah, although to be fair, I don't know if you saw that OpenAI made a couple of orders on like the memory thing, and they eventually canceled some of those orders.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Which was one of the reasons why the memory spiked.
Yeah.
But recently there was a crash in some of them because OpenAI came and said, all those orders we made, you just need to cancel it. And the reason why they did that was because they probably looked at like their initial trajectory and were looking forward and saying, okay, we need to order down this amount ahead of time. And they basically made like massive commitments. But now they're like, we actually are not going to be able to like fulfill like those commitments that we made. And it was I saw a video of Anthropic CEO speaking recently, and he was saying he feel, I mean, obviously he didn't name drop, but he was saying that he feels some people are not being
they ain't being real.
Yes.
He said BFFR,
man. So he was saying he feels like they're more responsible in how they handle things. And he was talking about, for example, how they've had 10x in revenue and all of that.
Twice.
And he was saying, so currently, let's say they're supposed to order let's say like 100,000 or whatever. And he goes and says, okay, because we've done 10x before, let me go down and place an order for 1 million units. And he's saying like that he feels is not very responsible, because is it really realistic that it keeps going at that rate? So obviously there's a balance between like securing enough but also not overdoing, because if we make that kind of commitment, and like I don't know what legal bindings they have, like if you're actually tied into it and you have to like buy those things, you could go bankrupt because
I mean I think we're getting into I'm not gonna sit here and say that's not a possibility. I have looked at the trajectory of those numbers and thought they started to look quite crazy as well. I know we were talking about hundreds of billions in investment spend and only having tens of billions in revenue. So people were asking some legitimate questions about squaring that off and reconciling that.
What's happening here?
That don't get me wrong, that I agree with. But again, at the same side, I still kind of look at it and go, each of these chips needs a certain level of DRAM and HBM. So you do also have to kind of think of that as well, right? So what are we actually saying? Yeah. Are we saying then that the needs and the level of compute are not going to keep going?
It'll definitely go up, especially from the robot angle.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the cash flow question is massive and legitimate, but I'm just talking about the market. I don't know. Yeah. And you know what, look, I think that's a good segue onto part 2, man. I think I actually want to take us a little bit further. There was a massive piece of news this week. Everyone read it. Everyone was talking about it. Tim Cook.